in the Valuing Voices principles, and we're going to be looking at equity and diversity in teams today. And we've got some guest speakers, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we've been developing definitions for this project, for this principle within our project, and how it relates to the tool that we've produced as well. So to dive straight in, really, equity and diversity in teams is one of the 5 Valuing Voices principles for equitable and responsible research. And it's a really central principle to our project, both in terms of the immediate research team and the ways that we work together, but also when we're thinking about global partnerships and global equity and how we work with teams in international settings in ways that work for everybody. So very particularly in relation to this principle, we've been thinking about fair recruitment processes for research projects, how from the very beginning you put together that equitable and diverse team. And I know Emma's going to talk a little bit about that today as well, with the kind of things that the seed funded projects that we have at the university have been really making headway with that. And we have a HR officer on our team who's able to kind of link us up with actually making changes to recruitment processes. So that's from the very start, how do you put together the team? And then thinking about putting together a team across disciplines who can deal with challenges, the kind of the complex landscape of research that we're working in today, and how we're working across disciplines and building those common languages while retaining the differences that we're experts in. We've also been thinking, of course, about team equity, diversity, inclusion, in the ways that we kind of think about that in research culture in terms of cultural backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, but really digging down into kind of deep definitions of diversity, thinking about age, thinking about gender, thinking about the kinds of experiences that people have potentially in industry coming into projects, thinking about professional services working alongside researchers. So really broadening that definition to think what kind of diverse team you put together and how you share experiences and knowledge across it. And built into that is a sense of professional development for everyone. And we know that we're all working in quite a precarious climate. We're working on short projects and you're not always sure what's coming next. So how do we build structures into short-term projects to make sure that everybody is still gaining experience beyond? So just to drill down a little bit more into some sticking points in the definitions that I've outlined there. So defining abstract concepts by deliverable actions, what do I mean by that? Well, equity and diversity look different in all different settings, and we've just done some training out through Makerere University in Uganda. We were having lots of conversations about how equitable relationships and teams mean completely different things to to different teams. So really we're thinking about how do you define your equitable and diverse teams by your actions, by the practical things that you do, the models that you put in place, and building up from those practical details to define your own team and own that definition. And that's really central to the tool that we've developed and the resources we've developed around this principle, those practical actions. We're also thinking in the same sense that every team is different. And while we absolutely want to put together the best team for a project, we want the best people there, but we also want a team that's flexible, varied, where people can learn from other experiences, where there's a PI who might be a senior researcher, but there's early career scholars who are coming through. There's professional services staff who are really key to knowing the grant landscape and actively managing projects, people who have connections to industry or those you want to engage with. And thinking about how you set up structures, collaborative structures and leadership structures where everyone can learn from one another. And you have those kind of formal mentoring relationships within the team itself. And we recognize that it's hard to put together an authentically diverse team without kind of box ticking. And one thing we've learned from this project is that a way to start to think about how to do that is to think about who your stakeholders are, who you want to engage with, and does your team reflect those aims? So if you want to work with certain communities or Indigenous populations, have you got a representative from that community on the project? Will they see themselves and trust the team that you've put together? Similarly, if you want to work with young people, are you giving experience opportunities to early career scholars who are tapped into those kind of new ways of thinking? So it's a place to start. Who do you want to engage with? Does my team reflect that, and can I bring those aims to fruition? Which really begs the question of who is in your team, and thinking a little bit more broadly about a research team. It's not just the immediate people you work with, but it's very also related to those who you want to engage with. And this principle of equity and diversity in teams is deeply related to those that you want to involve in your research. And if you're working with a community who are essentially a data source, they are also part of the research team, and that changes the way that we relate to them. So why should we do this? Well, diverse research teams generate fresh perspectives on complex problems. Increasingly, we're seeing that from funders, and they address unfair hierarchies, which stop more impactful research getting done, and they promote global equity. And that is the central outcome that we've been working towards with our models. So, with that, and to think a little bit more about the ways in which we can implement and the things that we can actually do to get an equitable and diverse team, we'd like to introduce Emma Willingham, who's on the call, who is leading one of our funded projects. And I will just pass over to you now, Emma, to say a bit more about that, and I can move through the slides. So just let me know when you want to change them.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me all right? Yeah, grand, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Em. I'm from a project called XR Stories, and we sit in the School of Physics, Electronics and Engineering in the university. We've been going really since 2019, and the legacy work we've been doing has been supporting researchers and businesses with research and development in the immersive technology sector, storytelling experiences using those technologies. Might as well move to the next slide. Thank you. So we've got a little interactive immersive lab in the Guildhall in the city centre, but we've done a lot of work from there. But we also have a sister project called XR Network Plus that was set up in 2022, and that's more research focused on virtual production. Now, that's a funded project, and that allows us to run funding calls ourselves. And we've done a few of these, which have been really successful. And then as the couple of years have passed, we've kind of been noticing that our demographics of applicants and then therefore funded projects within XR Network Plus were often similar, often the same demographics being applied and then funded, usually of a sort of senior professor level, male and white, usually, which is quite reflective of the creative industries, screen industries, immersive technology sector in particular. Next, thank you. So we wanted to think about that a little bit deeper and wonder if there was anything in the way we were putting our funding calls together that was affecting that. So we've tried, so in terms of like speaking about actually what we did to try and think about this, we started with what do we know? So actually thinking about, well, we know that the diversity seen throughout the United Kingdom is not what is represented in the diversity in the creative industries. We know that the split that we're seeing in our funding calls is representative of that. We know that we would appreciate more of a diversity of voices. We know that brings a better range of perspectives and ultimately a better product at the end of the day. We know that EDI was one of the core project principles when we first set the project up in 2022, and we knew it was time to review it. Next. Thank you. Um, so this is kind of a look at the journey we've been on so far. There has been a little bit of jumping around as you'd expect, but these are the steps I'm going to try and talk through a little bit more today. So first, starting with analysis. Next slide. Um, so actually taking a closer look at the numbers, I suppose, of our funding calls. Now, because there's so much to diversity and inequality, we have a limited team of, at the time, 8 people. We focused on gender and disability as two quite key demographics. Um, and we saw, well, yeah, we saw that usually applicants were more so men, and women were more, women and minority genders were more likely to apply to smaller grants that we were putting out rather than larger grants, which is a really interesting point. And as I said, the Innovate UK data from a couple of years ago saw a very similar split as well. So it's quite interesting to see that split trickle down into smaller pots of funding that are going out. Next slide, thank you. Back one. There you go. Thank you. So after taking a closer look at what we'd already been putting out, we then tried to do a little bit of discovery and a little bit of research about what other people were doing. So trying to find examples of positive actions in equality and diversity. So particularly looking at other funding bodies, and I don't know if you're familiar with the Immersive Arts Scheme, but they've done a really good job with equality and diversity, and have made a real effort to bring a lot of positive actions into the way they run things. So they were quite a good inspiration for us. And we just wanted to build on what we were already doing. So trying to collate key examples that we could build on. So the actual practical action from that was very much creating a big old spreadsheet, a big list full of recommendations, and then the rationale for implementing those that we would then take to our Ex Ante Work Plus board. Next slide. So then, once we'd figured out some of the things that we wanted to do, we actually saw the Valuing Voices opportunity for the seed funding pop up, and it aligned so well with what I already wanted to investigate. And we thought, well, why not apply for this funding? And we could actually have some external support in looking into this and making changes rather than trying to do it all by ourselves and creating a little bit of an internal feedback loop, I suppose. So we applied for the Valuing Voices funding, and we are now running our project Research to Action, trying to improve the equality and diversity across immersive technology sector funding. So that is looking inwardly at projects like ours where we disperse funding, and how those processes are run. It's also looking at how we receive those applications and encouraging researchers to consider EDI in applying to those projects, and then also considering the EDI of the actual team applying as well. So we have collaborated with IDA XR Studio, who are a small initiative running workshops and training in equality and diversity in the immersive technology sector, so very convenient for us. And they helped us coordinate 3 training sessions. We did one with ourselves, the internal Ex Ante Work Plus team, to look at our processes. We did one with the CoStar Live Lab team, if you're familiar with the CoStar project, who are based out in Production Park in Wakefield. So they run, they also have funding and run a similar scheme. And then we did one with open to University of York researchers who wanted to consider EDI in their own project setup from start to finish. In our own particular session, we touched on some really useful things that I think it was really useful to be led by an external collaborator. So things like looking at our ambition and our core vision, mapping our service journey, looking at our own privilege, and really nailing down those next steps. Next slide, thank you. And so, yeah, audit is the best way to describe, I think, what we did. And it sounds like a really scary word, but really it was just looking in depth at each stage of our service design. So we broke down the funding call process and all the touch points where customers or like funders and researchers would interact with us, and addressed the recommendations both from our own literature research and the Valuing Voices sessions that we've done with IDA. We identified what we were already doing, which was great, what needed a little bit room for improvement, and what was new and needed implementing. So that was really good to box off some of the things that we're doing, so it was less overwhelming. And then we discussed obviously the action needed, the size of that action, and how to implement it. And most importantly, whenever I think anyone is doing something like this, assign an owner to that action. Otherwise, it just kind of disappears into the ether, doesn't it? So again, another beautiful spreadsheet was created, and then it was actually implementing the work. So next slide, thank you. Oh, this is actually something that we... Sorry, if you can hear my Alexa in the background, thinks she's been activated for no reason. Something that IDA showed us was the academic wheel of privilege. And whilst we've, in EDI studies and some of the research we've been doing, obviously focuses on protected characteristics, which are super important, but there are a lot of things that actually get neglected a little bit, I think, such as like caring duties, career stage, particularly ones in academic funding. So we started to think about actually maybe it'd be good to see if we can incorporate more early career researchers and make our processes more accessible to people who don't have as much time on their hands as others. So it was starting to think about that as well. Next slide. So we implemented a whole bunch of changes. This, I won't go into too much granular detail. I guess I could, if it would be useful to others later, I could share a copy of some of the things we implemented and why. But these were some of the really noticeable key things that we found was useful. So things like bringing an early career researcher into our executive board, writing a clear statement of intent around EDI, and so we all had a cohesive vision for what we wanted to do. Practical changes like making an accessible application form, that puts creating walkthrough resources on how to submit properly, and then quite a few changes around the review process as well. We made it a priority to try and find budget for paying reviewers for their time and then training them properly in how to consider EDI when reviewing applications as well, and paying for them for that training. Taking a portfolio approach to decision making. So instead of just going off the top 8 highest scoring, really taking into consideration how those projects have been put together, how they've considered EDI, the team behind it, that sort of thing. And as always with our funding calls, we provide constructive feedback to all applicants. So it was also making sure that was considered in the same way for everyone. Next slide, thank you. So yeah, the projects are just about kicking off, and that we selected, and we've had obviously sort of like positive feedback and in emails and things like that from people who had appreciated the way we'd gone about certain processes. But in terms of other impact that I've been able to pull out, we did actually have 5 of our 8 highest scoring projects being led by early career researchers and technicians, which is something that we don't see a lot of in the immersive technology industry. Also, funding opportunities for technicians, I think, is really low on the ground, and so that was really positive to see. We had an absolute influx of applications for this funding call in particular. So I think being able to take our reviewers properly through training and pay them for the time had a positive impact on everyone. They were able to take on a lot more and were really nice and cooperative. Yeah, we had no queries, or as far as I know, because we kept a contact log, no queries or problems with the submission process. I think everyone found it well. We did offer the opportunity for things like an alternative submission. So rather than having to do a written application, they could submit a video, things like that. Didn't have any requests for it, but it was there. Um, Having an EDI observer actually in our decision making meeting was really useful. So this was an external person from the university who would sit in and just be there to remind us of, have you considered this? And oh, we said that about that person. Should we think about it for this person as well? So just to really keep it on the top of our mind throughout the decision making process was really useful. I'd recommend that. Um, we included a question in our application form as well about how has this project considered equity and diversity and inclusion throughout your processes? And I actually had a couple of people getting in touch about that question in particular, wanting to talk it through with me, which I was happy to do. Again, not in like telling them what to put, but telling them really what that means, because I don't think they had the clearest idea. And it was great because at that opportunity, I could also point them to the Valuing Voices tool and say, please use that. This is exactly what it's for. If you're thinking about putting an application together, yeah, the online tool that Valuing Voices has put together was useful for that. And then lastly, we implemented like a flexible timeline for projects. So instead of saying projects must start by this date and end by this date, we gave like a 2-month buffer window for each end, so that if people had other mitigating circumstances, then they need to start a little bit later and end a little bit later. We could cater for that in our program timeline. So those were some of the key parts that I wanted to pull out and talk about. We'll go on to the next slide. So this is this is beyond what we've done with the Valuing Voices project. So that was really great to look at XR Network Plus's processes, but it's also spurred on a lot of future work. So we were able to get run a culture check inclusivity workshop for the internal team. So that was again run by Carisha in the university, who was brilliant. And she was able to let us all think about how we bring ourselves to work, how we interact with each other, and how that affects actually our work day to day. So that was really useful. We've had another separate workshop with some consultancy time with IDA XR Studio to write our EDI vision for the project, which is really good. Again, bringing everyone onto the same page and having something that we can then use for further communications and support our funding calls. One of our research associates in the team is now running a research project on the barriers for academics in grant funding programs. So largely looking at the actual difference between what funders like us think are the barriers and what academics actually report are the barriers, to try and close that gap or that difference there. And then finally, we're going to be running a little bit of running an event in April with a little bit of extra money from Valuing Voices, with similar projects that run the same way as us and similar facilities that run the same way as us, to share good practices and the impact that we've seen so far. And hopefully we're wanting to write up our findings from that and use it as the first step on something to present to larger funding bodies. I'm thinking EPSRC, AHRC. So we do have a proper long-term goal in mind, and we're just taking the first few steps at the moment to see how far these changes can go, and try and see more funders really take into consideration new and better processes rather than just doing the same thing each year because it works, and then we'll see the same people benefiting from it each year, you know. So yeah, that's it from me. That's what we've been working on so far, a bit of a whistle-stop tour. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, that's absolutely fantastic. And we were so delighted to be able to contribute some money towards this. And the way that you're taking it forward is brilliant to see so many great practical tips there, as well as a real overview of what it means to think about EDI in a really structural way right from the very beginning. So yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. And thanks for joining us. I'll hand over to
Cheers.
Karen now.
Thanks, Lucy, and thanks, Emma. That's great what you just presented. Just following on for that, and the next slide, Lucy, is is something, once you've gone through that application process, and hopefully as equitable as Emma just described, then what can you do to make sure that in the project itself you also have equity. So one of the things we did in Valuing Voices is that we created the lab handbook. Now we consider ourselves a living lab, so the name lab handbook was appropriate for us, but you can also call it a project handbook or a team handbook. And basically what it does is it's just a place where you set out team values and team structure, which is really helpful at the start, that you're all on the same page. You can do that as a team effort. So, for example, some of our values are like honest and open communication, being ambitious, being positive, and so on and so forth. It also formalizes team communication, like anything from when is our office day going to be, what's the best day for everybody, what do we put on an email, but what do we put on Slack? Where's the difference in that? It also just specifies what kind of meetings we have, who is expected to be at those meetings, and what do you do if you can't come, those sort of things. So formalizes team communication. It also has the listing all our roles, so everybody knows what everybody else is doing in the project. And together, all of that is it's great that you establish that in the first place, so you're all on the same page and you can iron out differences to start with. But it's also great for the newcomers who come later. So, for example, Lucy and I joined Valuing Voices not at the very start, but a bit later on. And we were presented with this lab handbook as a way of familiarizing ourselves with the team and all it stood for. And it just gives you some peace of mind in the beginning that you sort of, the basics are covered, what sort of team you're in, and you can take it from there. So it's a really good stepping stone, and it's something we definitely recommend for any team, for any project, to just take some time in the beginning, even though time always seems really tight in the beginning of a project, just to sit down and create this, because it saves you so much time in the long run. Back to you, Lucy.
Thanks, Karen. So I'm going to hand over to our HR officer now, who's going to talk a little bit, Alison, a little bit more. She's in the room with me, a bit more about her work. So I'll hand over to you, what you're doing for teams.
Hi, everyone, and thank you to Lucy and Karen for just giving me a little bit of space here to talk about some of the opportunities that we've got. So we're offering, sort of funded by the project, a number of sort of personal and team development opportunities, and you can contact us to find out a bit more about those and to sign up for them. We want lots and lots of people to do these because we want to evaluate, how useful they are for you, and see if there's something we want to put forward as recommendations more broadly. But we've been able to secure some funding for this to give them a bit of a try out. So we've got what we're calling a Community Without Limits self-profiler, which is a tool that you use by yourself. It's based around the 360-degree feedback tool that we use on the leadership development, and it's been developed by the same organisation that we've used for that. But it asks you a series of questions, how you rate yourself, from really experienced, really strong on this, to something that I could develop more. And it produces you a report at the end that will sort of summarise which areas you need to work from. We're using the Community Without Limits framework for that, and we've also added in some questions using the Valuing Voices principles, and it just gives you a little bit of guidance to, obviously if you're looking at promotions or you're looking at different roles, those are the sorts of values and behaviours that the institution's looking for, and it helps you to, I guess, sort of describe yourself in that context where you've got more experience, where you could look for some experience and some training, some development to fill some gaps. And it comes along with some recommendations of ways that you can do that. So that's one thing that we've got. For those of you that are managers or leaders, we're offering the 360 feedback that we do as part of our leadership development, just for you to do sort of standalone. You will get some coaching with that as well. So when you get your report, again, it will tell you sort of how you're seen by others, for those of you that are sort of less familiar with that. So the questionnaire goes out to people who work in your team, to your peers who work alongside you, and to your own line manager. And you'll see how those people kind of see you at work and get some coaching and some development. And that's really useful for people that are particularly wanting to sort of look at next career steps. So we've got that one. For teams, this is I think this is really quite good fun. We did this as a team, didn't we, for Valuing Voices when we started out. So we had our TMSDI team profile done, and then some of us, myself included, have gone on to be trained to facilitate that for other people. So each individual within a team will complete a questionnaire. It will tell you about your work preferences, and it's kind of on a sort of a wheel, and people will have preferences and strengths in different areas, and we'll be able to see that in our own teams, but it gives you something a little bit more tangible to work with. You can look at things like how you share work out in the team, so you've got people working to their strength areas. You can see perhaps where you've got gaps, unless you've got a very big team that's kind of been very carefully put together. There are probably some areas that are not sort of so well covered in terms of people's preferences, and it just shows you to be mindful of those and to pay attention as a team to making sure that kind of everything that makes the team successful is happening. After you've done your questionnaire and got your team report back, there are lots of options actually for how we can debrief that with you. The classic is to have like a day session, but we know that isn't possible for sort of busy teams, or we're working at the moment with a team that is very large and very geographically scattered, and has got some people that are only working on that project for a small number of hours a month. So we're looking at some flexible ways that we can deliver the sort of the debriefing and the ongoing team development in sort of smaller bite-sized chunks, doing as much of it as possible online. So talk to us, we can make something work for you. And then as a final thing, to support the 360 feedback, we are looking for some people who would like to have some training to be coaches specifically for that. We're really looking for people who've got some previous coaching and mentoring experience, ideally at York. So you've completed some of our in-house training, because we're working to develop a sort of a bolt-on, if you like, kind of training to be able to draw on your existing skills to specifically work with that 360 feedback tool. And I think we'd be asking people to maybe support sort of between 2 to 4 people with that feedback in our kind of initial trial. So yeah, that's what we can offer. Loads of great opportunities, all counts towards your 10 days of personal development, and can look really good when you're looking at sort of promotion applications and moving around and so on. So give us a shout. Does anyone have any questions about any of that right now, or do you want to leave it that you'll drop us a line if you want to find out a bit more? Real good. Okay, thank you. Shall I hand back over to you now, Lucy?
Thanks so much, Alison, who's been such a key player in helping us develop models for team equity and sharing her HR knowledge, which is absolutely invaluable to us. So just a very quick whistle-stop tour of a few more things that we do, a bit more help that's there for you at York. We have also been running some very popular training sessions on using facilitation skills for effective meetings. And this started as a training program on essentially running project meetings, those regular team meetings that you have. It might be that you work in quite a complex team with lots of different people joining online, and how you manage that. or that you have lots of people who are kind of at different levels in their career, and how do you make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak in meetings and that those meetings are truly inclusive. So we started running those just as sessions for open to all staff, and we've had lots of professional services and research staff come to them. But we've also had teams come forward and say, you know what, we're struggling with our team meetings. We would really like this training as a team, and to kind of have a bespoke session. And we know that teams have found that useful in the university. And it's a bit of a team building experience to go through the training itself together as well. So that's something that we offer. And we've also run it the same session, the same skills and techniques, but for stakeholder engagement. So they're kind of applicable to settings like that as well, where you're wanting to make sure that when you run stakeholder workshops, everyone's getting a chance to contribute. And actually, as one of those sessions, it was nice because there were PhD students and their supervisors attending that session. So within the session, again, there was that kind of mentoring relationship, and we hope, and we heard from PhDs, the PhDs who attended, that they can take forward those skills into their own research career. So it's been really flexible training, and we're very, very happy to hear from teams who feel like they might benefit from that as well. And in April, I believe on the 27th, we will be running a fair attribution training session on those more formal ways that you attribute everybody who contributes to a research project, and there are taxonomies in which to do that for, say, journal articles. But we'll also be thinking about how, when you engage those outside of the immediate research team who contribute essentially to your research and might be seen as part of the team, a community that you're working with, how do they have ownership of your research outputs as well when they've input? So feel free to get in touch with us about anything there. But for the next section, I'll hand over to Karen.
Thanks, Lucy. If you can stop sharing, and I'll share my screen. Can everybody see that? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we've talked about valuing voices, the project, and especially equity and diversity in teams. And valuing voice is one of the ways to help people get a grip on the principle of equity and diversity in teams, and the other four principles we have for equitable and responsible research. We've built a tool, and I'm just going to quickly show you what that tool entails and how you can work with it. So I don't know why I'm getting this message. I'll just say leave. So I'm here, yes, on the front page. So here are the first page of the tool, which is valued voices voices voices.ac.uk. This is a few of 5 principles. What the tool is all about, who it is for, what it is for, why you should use it. Just basically at the glance, some of the features of the tool and some nice testimonials. One of those testimonials here is from Oliver Gregg, who used our tool to secure a 10 million euro grant from the European Research Council, and he particularly looked at equity and diversity in teams. So he used that to really think about how people could benefit equally in his project, and not just the top layer, basically. So that's been very encouraging for us to know that the tool really works. So going back to the top a second, but to these principles, and so here you can see an overview of all 5 principles, equity, diversity here in the middle, and you can just explore the the principle, what it means in the valuing voices context, to get a greater understanding of it, just as you are doing here now. Alongside the principles, we have collected resources about each principle, and you can filter. Sorry, I think I clicked on the wrong. I clicked on reflection and learning. So I can filter, I can go to equity and diversity in teams. And you can see that, for example, the 360 reviews, the benefits there are a resource here. A living lab case study about the way we figured out how to run our team. There's here one simple heuristics to run a research group is something I found really nice. It's from the Max Planck Institute, basically a researcher talking about his top tips to run a research group, including where people sit, making sure they get together often, that they have tea and coffee at 4 o'clock each day, those sorts of things. This person put in a really informative paper. So there's all kinds of resources. You can filter by level. So do you want something in depth or just a quick read, or an introduction? You can filter by type. Do you want a toolkit, or do you just want to read a blog post, for example? So there's different ways to explore the resources. The next tab up at the top is the results-based planning. So results-based planning is basically the model we use to work through those principles. And results-based planning is like the theory of change. You start with the big picture, what does success look like, and you work back from that to, what outputs do I need to create, what actions do I need to take, and what resources do I need to make this all happen. And so, as you see in the tool itself, which I'll click on now, you'll see how that works. I save my answers here. Yeah. So what you see here is the page, so to speak, where you can fill in the results-based planning questions related to equity and diversity in teams. So, for example, what does successful equity in teams look like in your project is the first question. And for this example, we've applied that to Valuing Voices, the project. So we are a project that want to promote equity and diversity, equitable and responsible research, which means overcoming barriers that have existed persistently in research culture, such as the equal opportunities for junior and senior people, which Emma touched on as well. Differences in who gets to publish in what journals. It's for some people, for example, from the Global South, it's not as easy to get publications in those journals. So all these barriers play a role, and as a team, we're trying to overcome these. So when we got together as a team, we had to figure out, well, how does that work for us? How does equity and diversity in teams look? What does that look like for our particular project, and what can we do? So the aim for us was to have an interdisciplinary team with diverse professional research backgrounds that works in a way everybody can thrive, right? Because that's also the aim of our project, making or helping research to create a research culture in which everybody can thrive. So we basically had to find best practices for for collaborative and reflective team building and sharing experiences and finding equitable ways. Basically, we had to figure out how to do it ourselves, but we definitely wanted to thrive. So how will you deliver your outcome? So in this example, we needed an agreed set of team values and set out how we wanted to work together. We needed to become a living lab. We needed to try things and reflect on them and share experiences. In other words, we needed to find a way to practice what we preach, right? And we also needed to do that with different leadership models. So how would we actually work together? Actions. So as I said before, one of our actions was that we needed to develop that dynamic lab handbook at the start of the project. Another one was that we needed to experiment with initiatives for helping us to thrive, such as one of the ideas we had was the facilitation techniques that Lucy talked about, to try that one out. And we needed to make sure that we spread the word about our own experiences. So practicing what we preach, and that also made us more believable as we were sharing our goals for and our ways to promote equitable and responsible research. Another thing we needed to do was to identify a leadership model, and that worked for us. And that took a bit of time. We had a very flat model where everybody had decisions. Had to make decisions about everything. Very equal model, but it did not work. So we came to having a distributed leadership model. And the fourth step, so that is really getting into the nitty gritty, going from that broad idea, okay, we want a place in which we can all thrive, that is diverse in terms of views on different aspects of research culture. So what could it be? It would of course be, as we have Alison on our team, HR officer to provide expertise. Has been really useful. We have set aside budget for external expertise, for example, for those facilitation skills. We have budget for when people actually grow into a new role, that we could actually pay for that. So that's actually happened within our team, that somebody got promoted, and we have allocated resources for equitable travel and presentation. So that means that different team members have the opportunity to further themselves to grow by having the opportunity to attend conferences and to present at conferences and so on and so forth. Now this is just a really simple outline of how you can fill this in. What we have found out by presenting this approach is that it really helps teams think in a different way. It makes it possible to have new discussions, different discussions about all these about these principles. And it results in more creativity and a better way to try to implement equitable and responsible research. We're not saying it's easy. As a living lab, we grapple with lots of things on a daily basis, including equity and diversity in teams. It's something that you need to keep working on and keep keep reflecting on to make it happen. But what we're saying is, you know, equity and diversity is definitely a key aspect of making your research equitable and responsible. And alongside those other 4 principles. And we're also saying that if you use those 5 principles, if you look at those in your project, and look at them consciously, and maybe get away from the way you always do things, then you definitely have equitable and responsible research covered in your project. You've made a good start with it. So that's the reason why we've built this tool, and that's the reason why we encourage everybody to use this tool. And we're also, I mean, we're constantly learning about this as well. So we learn from projects like AMS about equity and diversity, from the other funded projects that we have. We learn from workshops. We learn about different ways in which you can use this tool, and we also encourage people to contact us if they see fantastic resources about any of the principles to add to our toolkit and to our resources. So that's just a short whistle stop of the tool. We encourage you to use it and let us know what you think, and if you have any questions to contact us about it. Okay, so that's it for the tool. I'll switch to the slides. It's time for questions. Does anybody have any questions? Either for me or Lucy, or is Alison still there? Alison's not there, but for M definitely. So no, I don't see. I'll just look at the chat if there's a question in chat. Okay, no questions for now. Okay, thank you. Sorry, move on to the last slide then. Okay. Yeah, so yeah, we've covered equity and diversity in teams today. This is one of 5 deep dives into the principles that we have defined to be the main principles for equitable and responsible research. The next, so we have already had a session on engagement and impact, and the next session on the 15th of April from 1 till 2 will be on strategic risk mapping. And so the reason why I would encourage people to attend all the sessions or look back maybe at the recordings is that all these principles they work together. So, for example, engagement and impact is about who you need to reach. That influences who you want on your team. Certain risks. How do you mitigate certain risks? That probably influences who you want on your team. So they all work together, all these principles. So I would strongly encourage you to have a deep dive into all of them, and either with us or through the recordings. And finally, we'd like to thank everybody so much for being here and for giving your time to learn about our project. We're on LinkedIn. We're happy to hear any feedback as well, either on LinkedIn or through our feedback forms. So thank you very much, and all the best.